you may need 2, 3, 4 slightly complex exercises. It should take a few minutes. These exercises are not supposed to be yes or no answer. That is not the idea. They have to spend some time and think about it and then come up with the answers. So that kind of questions we need to design. Next.
Gopika writes, watching a video on how e-commerce works before coming to class so that they will be able to narrate the methodology.
Okay. They
So
will
we're showing
narrate.
a video.
Okay, showing a video and their job is to narrate the methodology.
Yes.
Okay, done. If the instruction can make a bit more uh, descriptive, when you say narrate the methodology, I don't know how many students will
Uh,
exactly get it.
Excuse me, can I hello?
Yeah,
That's Gopika, sir.
Uh,
yeah,
Sir, if we give a video on how does this e-commerce work, and then
yeah. I think connection is gone, but probably you want your students to write down the steps how the e-commerce works. If that is the case, it's always probably better to say write the steps. I mean, what I'm saying is your instruction is always like this. As a teacher, I may be very clear, but the kind of words that we use may not communicate what you actually intend. So make it as simple as possible so that they get you exactly what is your intention.
so at least they could know what the who are the participants in e-commerce dealing, no, sir?
Yeah, so that's what. So now you say they could know, but we always discuss. I think we discussed a lot about this outcome. How do you know they know? It's only through an activity. What is that
Okay.
activity that you are planning them to give? It is like you say
Uh,
narrate
it
methodology.
we can actually give an option to make a shopping, online shopping,
Uh-huh. And
and then present what they have shopped using this e-commerce website.
so now you are telling more clearly. That means there is an opportunity, there's a context. They are going to do an online shopping. What kind of options do they make? So they have to describe it or write those steps. Am I getting you correctly?
Yes, yes, yes.
So these instructions, like what they are supposed to do, should be very clear to the student. Otherwise, flipped class may not be very successful. Next question.
Sharanya PS writes, the topic is comparative study of weekend supplements, newspapers. Ask
Okay.
students to read a minimum of 3 newspaper supplements and come. When they come to college, we can ask them to share the notice difference in the layout of supplements, content structure, usage of pictures, graphics, etc.
Okay. So identify the differences in particular aspects in three newspapers. That can be a cognitive exercise if that is what the teacher wants them to do. Essentially, the activity is entirely depends upon the outcome, what you expect them to do. So no need to really worry about designing the activity if you design the outcome properly. If you design the outcome properly, that itself is the activity. That itself is assessment. So if you at some point you will realize that the most important thing is designing outcomes. Because once you do that job properly, for example, I want them to calculate something. What is the activity? Calculate that thing. There's no other activity. Because you design an outcome based on the intention that this is the skill that I want my students to generate. And how do people get skill? By practice. So in the flipped classroom, what you are doing is you are giving large number of opportunities for practicing. And there you are there as an expert to provide feedback. That is the advantage of flipped class. They can do practice elsewhere, but they won't get the opportunity to get the feedback from you. You are the expert in that subject. That's the advantage of having exercise in front of an expert. Okay, next question.
Rennie George writes, giving different problems based on one theory.
So a theory related video can be shown and ask problems because the learning outcome may be solve problems on that theory. Then it's exactly matching. Next.
Shania Festus writes topic conservation of water. Activity prepare a mind map on different sources of water.
Yeah, mind mapping can be a on flipped classroom activity. Mind mapping essentially means they draw, they may be connecting different concepts and then provide that how they connect these concepts, how these concepts are connected. If they can explain to us through a diagram, that's called mind mapping. That's a good exercise. Next one.
Someone from the Cochin College asked students to share similar incidents from their experience or from newspapers related to the topic, be it a story or poem.
It can be an exercise to probably to begin the class or to motivate them, but I don't know how many of these personal experience sharing is going to help them to prepare the cognitive task that you want them to do. Always see this designing of this experiment or this exercise has to have a direct connection with your outcome. What you want them to do, ask them to do in the class. That's a basic thing. Next.
Another participant writes, Article 21 of Indian Constitution identify the cases decided by Supreme Court which protects right to life.
So their job is to basically identify those cases with Article 21 is permitted by the court. Is that the exercise? That can be an exercise if that is what. So then identifying those cases happens is the outcome that you are expecting. If that is the case, that is the job. Always think what you want them to do and provide an opportunity to do that. Next.
Soumya MR writes, instruct the students to create some analogies from real life situations regarding one topic and allow them to discuss and then introduce the topic. Example, language translators in computer science.
Okay, if I properly hear, which means you want the students to come up with examples from real life.
From real
Okay.
life.
So that if they come up with example instead of you providing example, it's always a good activity. They will try to understand the problem in a bit more in depth so that they will find out the example and come. Good. Next.
Dr. Sujata writes, I will suggest the students to watch a good video and then in the classroom ask them to write down important points on the board one by one and finally consolidate it by the teacher.
You can do that. Highlights or summary of that video, you can ask them to write. But always remember, there is only one activity. 50 minutes you need to fill with several activities like this. And always design the activities according to the expected cognitive performance. Next.
Anupama M writes, the topic is algorithm designing. Activity is to ask the students to present steps of making a cup of tea.
Yeah, even making a cup of tea needs an algorithm, but always ask yourself, is that the algorithm that you want them to design, or you want to have an algorithm which is more related to their subject? So probably once they watch a video of algorithm design, then when they come to the class, you need to provide a little more challenging activity so that they will stick to that activity and then they spend quality time on design of algorithm. So you can actually pose a question in your subject and ask them to design an algorithm. Their job is designing algorithm. Correct. Next.
Dr. Biju Thomas asks a question. Are there any techniques to measure the relative efficiency of flipped class over conventional class?
Answer is yes, there are techniques. One way of comparing is you need to have the same group of students and same teacher and same cognitive task of different topics. You teach it one by traditional way, one by flipped way. See how the students' performance. That is one way of comparing. Next, any other
That's all,
question?
sir.
Okay, good. So now you get a small design feeling. How do you design questions for a flipped class, because it's very important for a teacher that in flipped class you don't end up in another lecture. You should only ask them to do activities. As you can see in the slide, a couple of things that you need to take care for a flipped class is lecture video should not be like a 3-hour video. That's going to be boring. Nobody will watch and come. Give small chunks of videos. If you are lecturing and you are recording, make it 10 minutes duration. These 10 minutes have very important in learning, because 10 minutes, beyond 10 minutes, people generally say attention span. It is not attention span, it is retention span, which means your brain cannot, if suppose information is falling on your brain, beyond 10 minutes, if you are continuously receiving information, your brain may not have the capability to retain everything. Some of them will get washed out. This 10 minutes is average value. I'm sure that many of you can have more than that retention time. But when you talk about a bunch of students, take the average value. So if you are providing information, this is true for a lecture also, 10 minutes around, you can stop it. And then ask, so this video should be of short duration. Online class activities should be varied. So don't give always the same kind of activity. It can be multiple choice questions, problem solving, ask them to provide reason, ask them to explain concepts, draw something, calculate something. So you know there are different action words that you coin for learning outcomes. Now it becomes very useful. Those action words are now become actionable. You ask them to do it. A few FAQs. Can I cover the same content using a flipped class? Answer is yes. Most teachers cover more content and students learn it better. How will students respond? See, students are not familiar with this type of a method. So if you suddenly drop it, you can expect some resistance, but that is initially. And that not only, you cannot blame students, all of us are like that. When you do something which is completely out of the box or out of the, you suddenly do it, some resistance will come. Can I use this format in large class? Now it's online. There's no upper limit. Yes. Can I use this format in mathematically oriented courses? Yes, yes, and yes. Because mathematics is a particular subject that you can learn only by doing it. So here in the flipped class, the whole 50 minutes, they do something and you provide only feedback. So you have to, it's very useful for a mathematically oriented course. This I will skip now because we have taken all the questions, or if you have questions, I think we'll come back at the end. I'm just looking at the clock now. Okay, now we have another model. Please keep your questions. We'll come back. Part 2, that is called a blended learning model. This is another RBIS. So one RBIS is flipped class, another RBIS is blended learning model. This happens if our present situation allows you to have some offline class and some online class. This is also a likelihood that for the next one academic year, 1 year, you may be allowed to go to the class with 50% of the students at a time, and the other content you need to give online. If such a thing happens, this model essentially is a hybrid learning process. It represents a learning model which combines traditional classroom teaching and online teaching methods. So you can give some lectures or online and some topics in the class. So this is different from flipped class, because in flipped class, all contents are lectures are given on online and flipped classes are only for activity. In this case, whether it is lecture or activity, you are actually dividing your syllabus into two. Half of the syllabus online, half is offline. So now you need to see which are the topics in the syllabus I can make in online, which you can do in offline class if such an opportunity is provided. So now I want you to generate a few ideas of conducting a blended model class. I want you to think about the syllabus you teach, and design a blended model, which means which portion for offline and which portion for online. But the more important thing is share the criteria you are using for the apportion. Based on what you say that I'm going to do this online, I'm going to do this offline. That is your task. Half you can do online, half you can do offline. But in your syllabus, what is the reason that you pick up topic 1, 2, 3, 4, I do offline, 5, 6, 7, 8, I do online? What is the criteria you are going to use? Think about it. I'll stop sharing the slides now. If anyone is not clear about the question, you can also ask. More clarity is needed.
So the first one has come. Dr. Animal writes practical demo video for microbiology subject. I can do offline and share videos with students.
So practical demonstration video of microbiology subject I can do offline and share videos with the students. Practical demo video is in the offline mode, and another video with the and share the video with the students. So I know I think the animal what actually for blended model is in classroom you are teaching one subject, one topic. That ends there. When you go for online, that is another topic, not the same topic. So a blended model is you need to partition your subjects, the topics into two halves. Half of them you actually teach in classroom, traditional way or any other way. Half it is in online mode. So the question was, which one you want to do in the classroom face to face, which one you want them to do online, and what is the criteria that you use to differentiate them. Okay, next one.
Mini ma'am, could you just read out yours?
Hello.
Mini ma'am, could you read
Okay.
out yours?
Hi. So for teaching a topic regarding the viral replication, that I intend to take it in the class.
Okay.
While the classification of viruses in offline, because for the first one I need more clarification, more interaction with the students. So I have to take that one online and the other one offline because they have to go through that at any time.
Yeah. So that is a good criteria, because any kind of classification which require only just information, those things you can actually put in the online mode. And wherever you think there's cognitively slightly challenging activities are there, that you can bring to the classroom, where you can have, if suppose there is a doubt, you can clear those doubts, as well as you can have a face-to-face interaction. So that can be one criteria of partitioning your syllabus, which is offline, which is online. Any other response?
Dr. Sujata writes, take theory part online and give problems related to that topic for offline activity.
Yeah. So theory, you put a lecture video, problem solving in the class. Yes.
Manju writes, topic.
But one thing I want to clarify. So you should not be confused with the flipped class. In the flipped class, we also said theory in a video, and in the class, problems about the theory. So don't confuse that with the blended model. Blended model is anything topic which is only theory part is there, that on goes to online, but problem solving is not on those theories. This can be on different topics. So there's a slight difference between blended model and flipped class. Flipped class, the content remains same in the watching video, and you are going to do something on the watching video in the class. Here, the topic itself is different in the blended model. Okay, next.
Manju writes, topic is fiber optics. Online is fabrication of optical fiber and its applications. Offline is theory and exercise. Students need more interaction and help in steps.
Okay, so but yeah, Manju is taking the same topic for offline and online, but probably in blended model, what we normally do is, if suppose you are doing fiber optics and you want them to do completely online, you can do it and take some other portion which you think is more important for the student. So here you need to see the whole syllabus together and then probably say that these topics can go offline, these things can go online. Both classes you can make it interactive or lecture, that's a different thing. But here most important is to divide the syllabus into two sections so that something is purely dealt in online, something is purely dealt in face-to-face interaction. So there are things that face-to-face interaction is really needed in certain cases. So you need to identify those cases and then prefer those things for your face-to-face interaction. Any other example?
Yes. Someone writes, basic
Okay.
So Dr. Vinod writes, basic concepts are taught in classroom. Application of these ideas or tutorials are given as online.
I see. So this can be done if the applications of this theory that they learn in the classroom, if they just want to memorize those applications, if that is the cognitive load, you can put it online. But if you really want them to apply some of these concepts, I would recommend that the application part comes to the face-to-face interaction and theory part goes to the online. Because we know from Bloom's taxonomy, applying something is more difficult than getting the conceptual understanding.
Another one, the theory part can be taught in class and practical application-based exercises can be had online.
That is what I think we just discussed, or a similar one.
Dr. Viju writes, core courses may be taught offline, elective courses can be done online.
That is another way of looking at it, but that is not the one that actually we want. Like not about core or elective. Every course there are some intended learning. So a teacher who does core course, he may also need to do this a portion. Elective also the teacher has to do, because only half of the class you are getting. That is the blended model approach. You get face-to-face interaction 50%.
Vishaya Vijayan writes, topic explained by using diagram, prefer offline.
Okay. What is online?
She hasn't said that.
Okay, all right.
Vishaya, would you like to unmute yourself and clarify? So can we go to the next?
Yeah.
Joseph Prince writes, topic is inorganic and organic chemistry, offline classes, nuclear chemistry, bio-inorganic chemistry, heterocyclic compounds, online classes, chemistry and agriculture, drugs, food additives and cosmetics.
Is he saying why he is differentiated or divided like this?
Joseph Prince, would you like to unmute and clarify?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the online classes I selected is chemistry and agriculture, drugs, food additives, and cosmetics. And in that module, there is some definitions and examples only. So the students are very easy to understand.
Yeah.
So if I put that in online mode, then I can give so many activities.
Okay, so the easy part, suppose as I understand from the discussion, is those cases we are putting online is basically a set of examples which may not be that difficult for the students to grasp. Whereas in
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, there are a lot of discussions that you are expecting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Other example.
Rekha S writes radioactivity theory offline, then nuclear reactions and reactors online.
So I think always this more important is the criteria. Why did you choose this to offline, this to online? There should be some reason for that. So figure it out, that reason. I think from all the responses that so far we received, it looks like a relatively easy thing you can upload, but more difficult aspect, cognitively more challenging aspect you bring to face-to-face interaction. That criteria is very logical, because when you have a face-to-face interaction, the kind of explanations, the kind of discussion will be more effective. If there is no chance, only we do completely online, but suppose there's a chance that you can have a face-to-face interaction, bring difficult concept into the class, face-to-face interaction. So you can design activity, you can verify, you can provide feedback face-to-face. We'll take one or two and then we'll wind up.
Lakshmi Salim writes origin history of advertising offline.
What is that? Please say it again.
Origin history of advertising offline, structure, types of advertising online.
Yeah, so now you see, can see the responses and then see if somebody is telling the reason why they portion like this, because that is more important.
KP Rajesh writes teaching literature online and grammar offline because practical exercise required while teaching grammar.
So that makes sense. That's what everybody is saying. If you have more of cognitively challenging things are there, you take those topics to face-to-face class. Yeah.
That's about it.
Okay, good. So
Sir, excuse me, sir. I have a doubt, sir.
Yeah.
The topics, most of the topics in environmental biology, the students can score even in their absence in the class. In the offline, they can. But if it is an interactive session, then only they can score well, because the interaction between the students and the teachers are taking place there, no? So the specific topics or the papers like environmental biology, actually that needs an online interaction, isn't it?
So then you choose the flipped classroom as a RBIS, because in flipped class, they watch these things online, but when they come to the class, it is completely doing things.
Okay. So they also can contribute, no?
Yeah, they have to, so that you said they can only score marks only when they start doing it, right?
Score good marks. Even in the absence, they can pass, they can score, but
That
if it is
is
an interactive session, they can score well.
That is happening because the final assessment allows that. So the problem is with the final assessment.
Yes.
If you can work on the assessment quality a little up, you will automatically see that they cannot just hear and pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to third RBIS that we are discussing today. There are several names that you can see, more or less same meaning. That's why I just clubbed them. It's called problem-based learning, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, challenge-based learning. There are different names, but practically they are all same strategy. So let us see what is that strategy first. Problem-based learning instructional strategy. Number one, first step. Students are presented That means teacher is presenting a complex, ill-structured problem. So underline that word ill-structured. It is not the problem that you see behind the textbook. That is structured problem. In this method, in this RBS, you need to design purposefully an ill-structured problem. That is a difficulty that teacher is going to face. We are all good in structured problem design. But this method demands ill-structured problem. Now, second stage, students work to define the problem. They have to first understand what the problem is about and do identify what they know and what is relevant to the problem. They also identify what they need to know and how they will learn it. Students then engage in learning independently and then discuss among themselves. It can be done online to share learning and to use their existing and new knowledge to formulate solutions. They assess the quality of their proposed solutions and decide what additional learning is needed to select and refine their solution. So step 3, no teacher, all done by students. They have to discuss among themselves and assess where they are standing in connection with the problem. If they are standing very low, they have to identify what step else we need to take so that we can go further. These are all done by them. Fourth step, this cycle is repeated until the students arrive at an acceptable solution, which then they present online in written and oral forms to the teacher, where teacher provides feedback. This method is not easy, but very effective. So teachers need to do a lot of homework first for designing this ill-structured problem. Once you do that, then their entire design is how to guide the students to equip themselves to solve the problem. It is more like a PhD guidance. See, when you do PhD, you are not sitting in the class of your guide. I mean, there are some coursework, but for the entire period, you are not sitting and learning. You are doing something, you are exploring. And once in a while, you go to the PhD guide and discuss. And what he or she will do this or do that, right? I mean, based on some logical conclusion. So guidance, but who is doing? The PhD student is doing. Same concept can you bring into an academic curriculum? Then you are doing PBL. The difficulty is PhD is 5 years, but the semester time is only a few months. So that means a lot of design work. That's why I said it's not very easy, but whoever does this, the result is wonderful. Reason is very somewhat logical. Learners take the ownership of learning. In traditional approach, teachers take the ownership of learning. We have to pump. But in this case, they are supposed to take the ownership of learning. We give only guidance. PBL, basic idea, as I said, first give students a problem. This problem should be thoughtfully designed to apply concepts and procedures being taught either in the course or maybe in the previous course. Next, ask students how they will solve the problem. So problem solving methodology they have to find out. During that process, they will learn a lot. That is a key aspect of PBL. They are just trying to solve the problem, but during that problem, just because this is not a structured problem, they will learn a lot more than they learn from you from a lecture. Next steps are facilitate as they work through the problem. You give the guidance. This method is called PBL. Project is more or less same thing. Instead of a problem, you give a project. Project should be thoughtfully designed and ill-structured. That means there is no straightforward solution method available. That is a key thing. Okay, it is not. It's like more like an open book kind of question where there is no direct answer. So you need to work it out. Ask students how they will work through the project. Facilitate as they work through the project. Inquiry is also based on a first question. Question should be again designed properly, and then you can ask more questions and guide through always inquiry. You are asking them questions. Through these questions, you can guide them. Why we are doing IBL, PBL is, as you can see in this graph, y-axis is content, x-axis is process. There are 4 quadrants. In blue letters, you see unengaged and expert. This represents a journey in the classroom. When they enroll for your course, they are unengaged. That means low content, low processing ability. So on the y-axis and the x-axis, they are close to the origin because they come to the class with low content and low processing ability. Processing ability means using the content, how adept they are to use the content. That's called processing ability. They have low ability on both cases. That is how the class starts. Question is, when the time they leave, what do you expect? You want them to be experts. That means high content and high processing ability. Both are required. That is when we call experts. There are 2 ways you can take unengaged to expert. One, go directly to the y-axis. That means to the above quadrant of unengaged, where you pump content first. So they will have a lot of content, but their processing ability will be less. After they reach sufficient content, then you can work on x-axis, processing ability, move to the expert column. That is one way. Another way, as you can figure it out, the other way, you start processing ability. So go to the right lower quadrant. That means from unengaged to a case where again the content is low, but processing ability is high. You are moving to the x-axis. Then you can again put more content and then they become expert. So there are basically 2 ways. One, as you can show in this slide, one graph goes to the upper part, that means content emphasize, and one graph below, which is called process emphasize first. I want to stop at this point and quickly take some response. Which method do you think a better approach? Then I will tell you what research says about it. A content pumping and then process pumping method, or first you focus on processing ability, then provide more content. What do you think?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, if we adopt a process where we initially give high content and slowly increase the processing process. So initially, because most students are currently used to a high content and a low processing, so you slowly increase the processing ability. So initially give high content, but then slowly increase by the end of a semester or a year.
So your answer is first focus on the content part, then enhance the processing. Is that your answer?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let us see the other responses.
Sir, there are few responses in the chat
Yeah.
box. Most of them say processing ability first.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Somebody.
Dr. Vinod writes high content, then increase processing ability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Francis Xavier says processing ability first.
Okay. Yeah, so opinions are divided. Some of them saying that it is better to first focus on content and then give processing, because without content, what do they process? That is the confusion I think probably teachers have. And some teachers are saying focus on process, then give the content.
Yes.
I will tell you what research says. Research have established that a better approach to develop experts. Our idea is to make them expert. That means high content, high processing ability. A better approach is first focus on processing ability, then provide content. That is what research says. So the same question comes, without having sufficient content, what do they process? How do they process? This question always comes. That is because we always consider Bloom's taxonomy as a developmental model. We think that without understanding, they cannot apply. Without understanding, they cannot analyze. Well, To a large extent, that argument is correct, but the brain works in a very mischievous way. You don't have to have, you can still apply without properly understanding. So this is a tricky argument. You can ask me back, is that what education really desirable? Is that the way of education is desirable? No, I'm not saying that is desirable. You want them to understand and apply. I agree with that. But what I'm telling is a property of the brain. It can apply without understanding. It can create without understanding. In fact, many inventions happened without actually understanding the concepts. So the brain is slightly tricky stuff. So it works in many mischievous ways. What research says that you focus on their processing ability first and then provide content. That is very important. Otherwise, you may have a large number of people who have processing ability is very high, but they don't know what to process. Content is missing. That is not what education is supposed to provide. Both are required, content and processing. The question is, where you focus first. So RBIS says that first you focus on their processing ability. That's why we bring a lot of active learning strategies, whether it is online or offline. You ask people to think, make them active, extract from what is going on in their brain. Do this again and again and again in a semester time, as many number of times as you can. You will see that then they are now very adept with the processing. See, when we say biologically, thinking involves physically moving the neurons also. If you read some brain research, they say that it's actually a lot of effort is required. That's why learning, especially complex things, learning becomes an effortful job. So you need to provide this opportunity to make them adapt to that, and automatically they get the skill for that. This skill they won't get if they simply listen to you. That's why RBI say that lecture is a relatively less useful way. And process first, then you can always go back and then give the sufficient content. They will grasp the content very fast. That's what actually they have done experiments. I'm not getting time to describe those experiments. There are beautiful studies where they demonstrate how quickly they grasp the content once they are good in processing ability. But whereas other group of students where content was focused, even if they give examples, they were not very fast to process it. So this is the importance of RBIS or activity-based class. Okay, we'll go back to the slides.
Sir, two people have asked almost a similar question.
Yeah.
One person has asked, will it work on all student groups? And another one has asked, can it be possible in a heterogeneous population?
Every class is a distribution of cognitive abilities from students. No class is where all students are in the same background. Such a class is never exist. So any activity that you ask, the students responding toward them depends upon their preparedness. When you do it in the classroom, face-to-face case, the method normally suggests is you make them to group in such a way that one group contains more prepared and medium prepared and less prepared students, so that they can exchange between them and then tackle the problem. Such a situation may not be there for online. Then only the way that teacher can help the students is depends upon their preparedness. You may need to provide different feedback. But every student can do that. It all depends upon how much background information they gather to do that. Most of the time, background information is the problem. They are not prepared to do the job. Not because they are not able to do the job. It's not the problem of ability. It is the problem of their preparedness. They lack a lot of information that is necessary to do the job. So as a teacher, you may need to provide different feedback to those students, depends upon where they are, but they can do it. Next. Any other question?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, now we are going to the last RBIS. It's called Jigsaw. So these are all. So we in this particular 90 minutes, what we are discussing is 4 different ways of RBIS. But as I show in the first, there are several RBIS. Okay. Jigsaw basically means break your syllabus into 4-5 different main topics, or break the material to be covered into 4-5 different topics. Now you need to create students group and then assign each group a topic. Different topic. We have 4-5 topic, 4-5 groups. Each group get one topic which are different from group to group. Now each group will work on, so its members become experts on that assigned topic. You give the topic and you ask them to do something with the topic. That is your outcome. So there are different outcomes, different groups working on it. Create new groups of 4 to 5, which contains one member from each expert group. New groups teach each other about the 4-5 topics. I'll show a schematic representation, very clear here. Jigsaw works in 2 stages. Stage 1, as we said, 4 different groups. The color represent topic. Yellow group get one topic, blue get another topic, pink get another topic, and the light blue get yet another topic. So in stage 1, teacher is asking each group to become an expert in that topic. That means high content, high processing ability. That is called expert. Once they become expert, teacher believes that they have become expert by doing test, assignment, all those things. Stage 2 is peer learning. That means you mix the students. One yellow, one light blue, one dark blue, one pink. Each one is expert in that topic. So what they do in stage 2, they teach each other. Yellow guy can teach others what they learned in stage 1. Like that, other colors can teach the other topics. Teacher monitor. Teacher verifies. So stage 2, teacher is practically observer and feedback provider. Stage 1, you need to provide feedback. In addition, you have to give problems, assignments, questions, verify. So stage 1 more work. Stage 2, peer learning. So at the end of stage 1 and stage 2, our students will learn all the topics. In this case, all the 4 topics. So this method is called Jigsaw. This can be done in offline in an actual classroom very easily, but online may be slightly challenging, but still doable. You can create blogs or their own, WhatsApp groups where you're asking them to discuss. But there is no like a class where lecture is provided. This is the important thing about Jigsaw. Jigsaw doesn't have lectures. You can give instructions in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but they'll be working in groups. So when they work in group, this learning is called cooperative learning. They cooperate and learn. When they work, that's called active learning. If they work in groups, it's called active and cooperative learning. The essential thing is, if you want your students to be active, you should be passive. Don't disturb them. Allow them to work on things, provide feedback. This is the essence of RBIS. Now we'll take a few more questions, even from the flipped class, if you have questions. So we have discussed 4 methods: flipped one, blended model, project-based learning or problem-based learning, and the last one is Jigsaw. All these can be done online. Some are more easy for online.
So,
Yeah.
Francis Xavier has asked, can Jigsaw be applied to class of 40 students?
Read it again. Can Jigsaw be applied for a class of 40 students?
40 students.
Answer is yes. One of my colleagues in IIT Madras did it for a class of 70. So 40 is possible. Any of these RBIS, it is important that you need to do a lot of homework. That means, how are you planning to group them? What is the criteria that you are creating for the groups? It's not a random creation of teams. As I said, if you are making teams, let the team be heterogeneous. More prepared, medium prepared, less prepared students should be in one team, but doable. Any other?
Sibi Philip asks, how effective can flipped classrooms be for slow learners and non-motivated students? Would a jigsaw model be more suitable in such a setting?
Okay, Sibi, this slow learner might be a misnomer uh, because nobody exactly learned the kinetics of learning, like how fast this process is happening. What normally people meant by slow learner is those learners are appearing slow in the process. That is mainly because they have less preparedness. So we don't attribute them as slow learners. We say that they have less preparedness. That is the better way of telling. Can it flipped classroom be effective for those people? Um, well, if you have activities in the flipped class, which are group activities, and if there is a less prepared and more prepared student come together and do the activity, still it can be done. All that this low prepared guy needs is some more content and some more practice on problems. So you provide that opportunity, they will also come up. Their time required may be slightly more than compared to others. And non-motivated students, I think in one of the class I told that motivation is a personal agenda. Any strategy will be motivating a few and demotivating a few. So I don't think we can say that flipped class is not at all effective for everybody. Some students will get motivated by this also, but there is no general say or data saying that the moment flipped class happens, everybody get non-motivated or non-motivated students did not attend it. We have to do it because only when they try these things, some of the students are non-motivated in the offline, maybe motivated in the online. We never know. We have to do it and then see. Would jigsaw model be more appropriate? Jigsaw is possible only for those syllabus which can be parallelly processed. Please remember that process involves 4 or 5 groups parallelly working on topics, different topics. So if your syllabus allows that kind of an opportunity, then only you can do jigsaw. The topics in the flipped class, that syllabus you cannot do for jigsaw. Jigsaw demand a syllabus where parallel processing of 4 to 5 topics is possible.
Sir, can I ask a question? Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So the question, so you had mentioned about problem-based learning instructional strategy, where you give an ill-structured problem to the students. So when you give an ill-structured problem, what does it actually mean? Suppose I'm giving a student a way to identify, because my subject is microbiology, if I ask them to identify pathogen and I give them certain methodologies included in that which is not usually used. Would that mean an ill-structured problem, or how do we give them an ill-structured problem? That concept
yeah. So identify a pathogen is not a PBL problem. That cannot be a PBL problem because that is more like a straightforward question, and there are methods that are available for identifying the pathogen. In PBL, for example, an example that you can think of PBL, not maybe directly in your subject, but a common approach is they have to develop a method for an alternate source of energy, for example. So there are several methods available, but you are asking them to find out, develop something which can be used as an alternate source of energy to enhance efficiency. So this kind of an open-ended question.
So like So if I give them a question that these are the usual methods used for an identification of a pathogen, but you don't have the sources with you, what alternative method will you adopt based on the facilities in your lab? Because maybe I might ask them to diagnose HIV, which is not possible in their college laboratory, but you can ask them to think of another method which can be used, probably used for its identification. Would that be an
So yeah, so that's another thing, like find out an alternate way of diagnosis. If that is what the problem based learning is, that is good enough. That is, they are trying to work out a novel method of diagnosis. That is a good enough question for PBL. But now ensure that they have the data required for dealing with the problem. This is very important. The sources, when you ask the PBL, because remember in PBL you are only guiding them, they have to do all the cognitive work. So when you ask them to find out an HIV treatment, a methodology, what are the required journals and the knowledge that they need to create, all those things should be available to them. Otherwise this strategy cannot be useful. So make sure that the data that they want to process is available to them. Otherwise you can provide it, that's also possible, but more effective will be always they find out. And just for your information, this method happened in medical school. Diagnosis, I just want to say that PBL originally happened in a medical school and then spread to other disciplines. Okay, next question.
okay? Thank you, sir.
In the
It is
chat box,
11:30, so we will take a couple of more important questions and then, yeah.
there's only a comment over here.
Okay.
It says that unknowingly about the jigsaw puzzle, I have adopted the same and proven to be a good method. The results are better now.
Good. That's a live witness. Good. Very nice. So we wind up now. It is 11:30. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to be a part of this FDP. I enjoyed the online classes. Over to the coordinators.
Thank you, sir. Gauri? Is Gauri here? Gauri?
So there
Hello,
are a lot
Gauri?
of messages thanking you in the chat box.
I think Gauri is not available. So thank you very much, Dr. Prasad, for the 3 sessions you have taken. It was really informative and all the participants have submitted good comments for you in the feedback form. And we will try to apply at least 1 or 2 methods you have taught us or you have suggested. So thank you very much. On behalf of IQAC Sri Shankara College Kaladi and on behalf of all the participants here, I extend our heartiest gratitude to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.